Hey everyone, Sean here for Lambda School, and in this video we're going to be talking a bit more about the HTTP protocol. More specifically, we're going to be looking at how to actually format HTTP headers in order to encapsulate HTTP packets. And this is going to be useful because in the web server project, you guys will be manually constructing the actual requests and responses sent between the client and the server. And again, just as a really quick overhead recap, specifically the HTTP protocol deals with the formatting of the actual requests and responses so that clients and servers always have a sort of contract and are able to always know ahead of time exactly what format they can expect of requests and responses getting sent between them. HTTP is not concerned with how data actually gets from one place to another over the internet, nor is it responsible for caring about reliability. As we saw previously, the TCP protocol actually deals with that, and then the IP protocol is what actually is concerned with how data gets from one place to another over the open internet. So let's take a real quick look at the format of a GET request that might be sent from a client over to a server in order to request some sort of resource. So of course, first off, we need to specify the HTTP method. So that comes first. Next up is the URL, and this is the URL without the domain name. This is the protocol and the version. Here we'll always be assuming HTTP/version 1.1, and then the actual host, which is the domain of the target URL. So here we're basically just requesting lambdaschool.com/example. And then lastly, when you're actually constructing the GET request, you need a blank line at the end indicating the end of the request, although this will basically just take on the form of a new line, so \n in this case. So now let's look at a possible response. Here we have a 200 response that a server might send back to the client that requested some particular resource. So here again, we start off with protocol and version HTTP 1.1, the status code 200 OK in this case, the timestamp of when this particular response was created. Here we have a flag connection. In this case, it's closed, and this indicates whether the connection is to be kept alive after this response is sent, or if it is to be actually kept open, meaning there might be more data that needs to be sent over that TCP connection, in which case we don't want to close it yet. So you might see connection as either closed or it could be open in the case that we want to keep it open. But in this case, we're just going to have it close after this response is sent. Content length in this case is the number of lengths in the body. So keep in mind that that does not include the header itself. So the actual HTTP header of the response is not included in the total number of bytes for when calculating content length. Again, that's just the number of bytes in the body. And then content type is the content type or the MIME type of the data in the body, right? And that just tells the client, once it receives the response, the data that the server sent back in response to its request. The content type tells the client how it needs to handle the data, right? Because there's a number of different types of data that the server might send back. It might send back, for example, an image. It might send back HTML text. It might send plain text, and a whole bunch of other different types in the body. And so the client needs that information in order to know how to treat that data appropriately. And then lastly, following a new line after the header indicating the end of the header, we have the actual data in the body. So here we have the data that's being actual data that's being sent back in the response. Similarly, here we'd have, if, for example, if the server sent back a 404, or it could also be like a 500 server error, for example. Here's an example of a response to that the server might send in the case of a not found. And again, it would be very similar in the case of a 500, for example. The only difference here is that the status code up top is different, 404 not found. Other than that, the timestamp is the same. Connection close is the same. Here we close the connection because we didn't find the resource. There's no point in keeping that connection alive. Content length here is going to be a lot shorter because in the body of the response, all we're sending back is the string 404 not found, which is a much shorter string. So here it's only 13 bytes of data, and it comes back as plain text, in this case not HTML. And then in the actual body, just again 404 not found, indicating the message in the body. And so really quickly, let's talk about a few things to keep in mind when crafting HTTP requests and responses. So again, as we said earlier, the content length field only gives the length of the request or the response body, not counting the blank. So it doesn't count the blank line. The blank line is considered, you can consider that part of the actual header, and then right after, following the blank line, that's when you'd start counting the actual length of the data, because at that point you're in the body. And again, content type gives the MIME type of the content in the body, tells the browser how to display it or basically what to do with it. If it's plain text, HTML, a GIF image, any other type, that tells the client how to actually handle that data that is returned in the body. And then lastly, even if a request has no body, like what we saw in our example request, it does indeed need to contain that new line at the end of the header, because again, that new line is what indicates this is the end of the header. Stop reading or stop parsing any header data past this point.